to troubles. I've seen some of the greatest examples of forgiveness, which we talked about last week, when someone is terribly wronged someone else, and that person is dealing with those troubles, but yet they've been forgiving in that. And I've seen some terrible acts of violence that resulted as troubles or someone wronging someone else. But some people think that they have to face troubles by going toe-to-toe with those troubles. While others will hide from their troubles, they'll go and they'll find themselves, as far away from everything as they can, including those people who are there to help them or to offer help. But unfortunately, one of the things that happens when we pull ourselves away from all of our sources of help, one of those sources, and the most important and the vital, is God. And sometimes we pull ourselves away from God when we need help and we fail to seek it from Him. But here's the thing, is I know as parents, sometimes we deal with our kids' problems for them, and that's, so much so that they never really learn how to deal with problems themselves. And I know right now some of your moms are like, you better back up, preacher, but it is what it is. We see it, and it's not just moms, it's dads too. It becomes a problem. I mean, so I see so many young people now who don't really know how to deal with issues when they come up, because every time that an issue's come up, mom or dad or both or grandparents or whoever has been right there to deal with it for them. We make an effort somewhat now with Bryson to put things on him a little bit. Obviously, anything overly traumatic or anything like that, we're going to jump in there and deal with it. And if we see that he's not dealing with it well, then we're going to intervene. But we try to leave him a little bit of leeway there to deal with things on his own to see how it works out. And oftentimes it works out just fine. But I can remember when Christy and I took Caitlin up to JMU, there was, and I forget what they call it, there was a name for the day that we went up there, but nonetheless, they separated us. They took all the kids went with this group of guides or whatever, and they left us in this auditorium, and they have this big screen in there, and all of a sudden there's this video of a helicopter, and it's just hovering, and it's making a so they talked about hovering over our kids and everything, and being a helicopter mom. That's apparently the title of a lot of college moms, and so Christy was all up in arms about it. She was not at all good. She's like, y'all better back up off of me. She said, no. And, so all the way home, Bryson and I would look at her and we'd be like, tuk, 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 tuk. So we was messing with her a little bit. But nonetheless, that's just what we do. When we see people around us, especially our kids that are in situations, we try to react to that for them. And so God's Word gives us a lot of illustrations of how we should respond to troubles in our lives. And He also gives us some illustrations of how maybe we should not. And I want to look at some of that today. So we're going to focus mainly on one correct response that didn't necessarily start out that way. Because, sometimes our immediate response to something is not the way that we continue responding, because we are able to adapt to things. And when we realize that we've maybe jumped the gun a little bit or gone into something a little too hastily, then we're able to turn around and backtrack. And that's kind of what happens in our passage today. So if you have your Bibles this morning, if you'll turn to 1 Kings chapter 19, and it's going to be one of those days, guys. I'm sorry, but I'm reading this whole chapter, so y'all just y'all going to have to bear with my elementary level reading. I have a reading buddy at Highland View. He's in kindergarten. He thinks I read well. That's all that matters. But it's funny. They had a book fair up there, so I bought him a book the other day, and I brought it to him. And I was like, "Listen, dude, we're going to look at your books, because they have like learning books for them." And I said, "We're going to look at your books, let you read that." And then I said, "I got you a book at the book fair." And he's like, "What you want me to do with that?" I was hoping you'd read it, man, or we can read it together and then you can take it home. And he's like, well, then what? I said, you're a hard nut to crack, buddy. I don't know. All right, 1 Kings 19. You found your place, say God is good? All the time. God is good. Amen. All right. So bear with me. I'm reading from the NIV this morning. And we're going to see what happens with Elijah a little bit. So 1 Kings chapter 19. Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them. In other words, she's going to kill him. Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the desert. He came to a broom tree, sat down under it, and prayed that he might die. I have had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the tree and fell asleep. All at once an angel touched him and said, get up and eat. He looked around, and there by his head was a cake of bread baked over a hot coal and a jar of water. He ate and drank, then lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you. So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. And when the word of the Lord came to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? He replied, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, broken down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too. The Lord said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountain apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? He replied, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, broken down your altars, and put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me. The Lord said to him, go back the way you came, and go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael, king over Aram. Also anoint Jehu, son of Nimshi, king over Israel, and anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, from Abel, Meholah, to succeed you as prophet. Jehu will put to death any who escape from the sword of Hazael, and Elisha will put to death any who escape the sword of Jehu. Yet I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have never bowed down to Baal, and all whose mouths have not kissed him. So Elijah went from there and found Elisha, son of Shaphat. He was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen, and he himself was driving the 12th pair. Elisha went up to him and threw his cloak around him. Elisha then left his oxen and ran after Elijah. Let me kiss my father and mother goodbye, he said, and then I will come with you. Go back, Elijah replied. When I have done what have I done to you? So Elijah left him and went back. He took his yoke of oxen, slaughtered them, he burned them with the plowing equipment to cook the meat, and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he set out to follow Elijah and became his attendant. All right, I appreciate you bearing with me through all that. There's a reason that I read all of it. Well, probably not the very last part, but I read that far, so we're going to finish it up. So anyway, so a little background on this. So we know, if you know the story of Elijah, you know that leading up to this, he had just had a battle, if you will, with the prophets of Baal. And so he made them look foolish, and well, he didn't. God did through him. And God sent fire down from heaven and burnt up the altar and everything after these guys had stood out there and started screaming for their God and didn't get anything, cut themselves and all this stuff. So then afterwards, all the people fell down and worshiped, and Elijah said, you need to kill these dudes. So they killed all the prophets, 450 prophets of Baal. There were another 400 prophets there, but I never have really figured out if they killed them or not. If they did, that was 850, so I'd say they won that one. But nonetheless, after this feat, he went to the top of the mountain and he prayed, and they'd been in drought for a period of time, 3.5 years, something like that. No rain had fallen, and he goes up and prays, and God sends rain. So right now, Elijah is on an absolute spiritual high. I mean, that brother's probably walking on clouds coming out of there. Well, nevertheless, there's got to be a snitch in the crowd, right? So Ahab goes and tells Jezebel exactly what happened and says, Elijah has killed all your prophets. Well, that upset her because these prophets, not only were they, pagan prophets and that lifted up her pagan gods and all this stuff, but they also lifted her and the king up and talked about their prominence and how it is, that they were going to be great kings and queens and all this stuff. So she's pretty upset about that. She's invested a lot of money in all this. So now we see here in 19 that she is angry with him, and she swears to kill him by the next day. Says, by the next day, you're going to be dead, or the gods can deal with me however they want to. But here's my thing, is how many times have we found ourselves riding a spiritual high and then immediately falling under attack? How many times, how often is it seems like when everything is going the way, you're thinking, man, I am really starting to get this Christian stuff. All these years I've been doing this, and I ain't really figured it out, but now it's all coming together. And I'm seeing blessings. I see things happen in front of me, and I'm like, man, this is awesome. And then the next thing you know, you get your legs cut out from under you by some sort of trouble that you're dealing with. Whether it be an illness or, something going on in the family that's difficult or whatever it may be. I remember when God called me to ministry, I had a friend of mine who had been in ministry for a long time, and he called me up and he's like, hey man, it's awesome, man. I'm awesome. I'm so excited that God has called you into ministry. He said, go and get ready. I was like, get ready for what? And he said, the battle. He said, because the enemy's going to attack you from every angle. The enemy's not going to be pleased with what you're doing. Man, was he right. I mean, things started crumbling. I started looking around. I'm like, man, I'm trying to do a good work for the Lord. And I look around. My house is in disarray. There's problems in the family. There's problems with the extended family. My career, things are jacked up there, and I've realized that I'm in a place that I'm not happy. And so I started doing everything and praying on it. And finally, God showed me some answers, and I was able to make the decisions where I felt like that God was leading. I come out of those positions and was able to free myself from a lot of that through the power of God. But I'm telling you, there was a great battle that took place when I made that announcement that God had called me to preach. And I was riding that high because people were actually calling me. I was like, why are people calling me? Never even heard me preach, but they're calling me, want me to come to preach. And so then the enemy looked at that and he's like, no. I got to crash things in on him. I've seen it happen in other people's lives, not just in mine. I can't tell you how many people I've seen leave the Emmaus walk. And when you leave the Emmaus walk, man, if you've really gotten it, if you've invested yourself, and these men and women that have been can tell you, man, you come out of there on a high. Because you spent 3.5 days doing nothing but searching for God. That's it. Searching for God. You're cleansing things, you're laying things down, you're dying to things, you're trying not to pick those up, and you come out of there, man, and it's like nothing you've ever been through before. And you are riding high, and you go home just so the enemy can have something waiting at home just to slap you in the face. Because he don't want you to ride that high too long. Why? Because you're going to take that high to other people. all of a sudden you find yourself doing that thing that God told you to do. Go out and make disciples of all nations. The enemy's not going to stand for that. Not going to stand for it. He's going to try to tear you down. It's exactly what happened to Elijah right here. It's the nature of the spiritual battle. When we enter into a relationship with Christ, we automatically enter into spiritual warfare, even if you didn't sign up for it. Like some people sign up for the military and they're like, man, I didn't do this for war, man. I signed up for the GI Bill. Well, guess what? If war comes, that's part of it. Well, when you sign up for a relationship with Jesus Christ, you can guarantee that you're going to be in the middle of spiritual warfare from that point forward. And it's made up of many battles over and over. You're going to be faced with battles. And what truly defines that relationship with Jesus Christ is how you come out of those battles. But not because of your doing. It's about how much you rely on Him to bring you through the battles. This is why Paul told us to put on the whole armor of God. He didn't say just make sure that you got a billy club next to your bed, or make sure you got a big shotgun or 44 Magnum, whatever. No. He said put on the whole armor of God. Everything. If you read that, you realize that when Paul was referring to put on the whole armor of God, he covered from the toes to the top of the head. Everything. And he gave us an offensive weapon in there too. The sword, right? The sword of God. So we got to be ready to fight these spiritual wars by being prepared with the whole armor of God. But we go on here to learn that Elijah, the great prophet of God, Elijah is one of the greatest prophets ever, right? What did he do? He got scared and ran away. What? This mighty prophet of God got scared and ran? Yeah, he did. You know why? Because he's not God. He's a prophet. He's a man. So the next time you find yourself not responding to a situation you thought that maybe you should, in the way you thought that you should, just remember that even the most powerful prophets didn't always get it right. There's going to be times that we deal with things that our response is going to be to turn and run. Or that our response is going to be to give up. That's going to be our response. And we see some of that from him too. Then in verses 3 and 4, we find him leaving his servant and going into the desert where he prayed to die. It says Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there. While he himself went a day's journey into the desert, he came to a broom tree, sat under it, and prayed that he might die. He prayed that he might die. I can't tell you how many times I found myself in a difficult situation and I've said, God, just take me home. It would be so much easier for you to take me out of here than me to have to deal with this. Well, who am I that he's going to bless me with that when so many others have had to deal with their problems? And I've prayed, Lord, just come back. Take us all home. Put an end to all this. But that's selfish prayer. And that's what God is trying to tell Elijah here. Listen, I've given you so much authority through prayer. I've spoken to you and given you the word to speak to kings and queens and others. But I will not take you out of this world just to help you avoid a situation. I will not do that. I can definitely relate to how he felt right there. And I got a feeling that some of us in here, there's probably others that can too. But here's the thing, is we know that this is not how God teaches us to respond to problems. Because we've seen too many other examples in his word. We've prayed on it, we've learned on it, and those of us that were in, that have been through Sunday schools or whatever, we learned about it as a kid. But we are human, and we all fall weak sometimes. So when we reach that point, sometimes it's easier for us just to throw our hands up and say, I can't do this, God. Take me out of here. But here's the thing. Look at the next few verses. The Lord's angel tells Elijah to wake up and eat twice, and he did. All right? Twice. He said, get up and eat. Get up and eat. You ain't got to tell me twice to get up and eat. Me and Billy, we're going to get up and eat the first time, you know. But now, here's the thing. Now look at verse 8. Verse 8 says, well, let me find verse 8. These letters are smaller than my other Bible. I can't really see where I'm at here. All right, verse 8. So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. 40 days and 40 nights. Now, it don't put it in context of a fast, but this dude got up and traveled 40 days and 40 nights straight to reach Mount Horeb, only on the strength of a couple of small meals that he ate. In other words, what was he doing? He was fasting for 40 days and 40 nights. So 40 days and 40 nights, he was traveling, but he was fasting on his way there. Now keep in mind that Moses and Jesus both also fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. Both of them. And you know what's cool about that? Is the only three people that we have in here that, in God's Word, that fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, they all show up at the transfiguration of Christ. And that's Moses, Elijah, and Christ himself. But what's awesome about that is we see the results of that fasting in what takes place in their life after that fast. When he reached the mountain, he retreated to a cave, and he decided to feel sorry for himself, though. So he's fasted now, and I guess during that journey, maybe he expected something to happen on his way there. And see, that happens to us a lot, because while we're going on this journey, we keep expecting something to happen, and when it don't, we want to go and feel sorry for ourselves. We want to pile up and, oh, woe is me. Woe is me. God, how can you let me go through this? The question should be, how can you not? I want to suffer for Christ's sake if I know that it's something to lift him up. I don't want to suffer, don't get me wrong. I'm not asking for God to put suffering on me. But if it has to do with lifting up the name of Christ, and if it would possibly take one lost soul and turn that around and give them eternity in heaven with God, I'd be willing to suffer for that. I absolutely would. But I also have felt sorry for myself many times. Whoa, Lord, I can't deal with it anymore. Please, God, help me. I don't understand why this is going on. I've been doing so good. It ain't been that long ago that I was whining like that. Yeah. Here's the thing, though. When we start feeling sorry for ourselves, sometimes God's going to speak to you. But Elijah's all like, God, I'm down here and I'm doing all this and no one appreciates me and I'm all alone and folks want me dead and I just, all this stuff I've done for you. I ain't doing it anymore. I can't. I just can't handle it. I'm going to live in this cave, far away from everything. That's the way I'm going to deal with this. And God says, look, get off your hind end. All right? Get off your hind end. Go out on the mountaintop, and I'm going to pass by you. So stop your whining. We're going to work this out. All right? So Elijah then, all right, he goes out on the mountain. He does what he's supposed to do. He stands there, and he waits on God to pass by him, just like God said he was going to. And so we see that first this great wind rises up. And I mean, when I say a great wind, it's tearing stuff up, breaking rocks, doing all kinds of stuff, right? And God's not in that wind, though. And Elijah knows that. And then after the wind comes the earthquake. And God's not in that earthquake, and Elijah figures that out. And then here comes the fire. And Elijah says, no, I'm not seeing you. I'm not seeing you. He knew that God wasn't in any of those things. None of those great, powerful things. And that's how we think about it. When we think about God doing something and moving, we see all these great and powerful things. But then what does it say? It says there's a gentle whisper. In some translations, it'll say a small, still voice. Whichever translation you got. Nonetheless, it was quiet. And he whispered in his ear. Just whispered in his ear. I mean, that's all it took. And sometimes, we only look for God in those big, powerful ways. We only look for God to show up in rallies and revivals and, and mighty preaching. I know a lot of us here like to listen to Stephen Furtick preach. I think he's a powerful preacher. And other powerful preachers out there, David Jeremiah and all this stuff, and John MacArthur, all these guys with so much wisdom and so much power in their word when they speak, and we're sitting there and we're waiting on God to do something mighty when we hear that, and sometimes we get let down because it's a great message, but we don't see God doing anything fantastic through it. But then we go and we get in that quiet place. And all of a sudden God moves on something in your life and you see it happen like you've never seen before. And all you can do is praise him. And I'm a big baby. I praise him by weeping most of the time when I see it and I feel it, and I just break down, man. And but it's like a cleansing. It's like God's letting me cry all that nonsense out because, all right, I'm cleansing you right now. When we face those troubles, though, we got to do that sometimes. We got to step away from it, all the noise and the busyness of life and everything, because we can't hear him. So many times, again, I'll give you a law enforcement reference. I've gotten out of my car and people have been angry and they've been yelling and yelling and yelling. They're mad at each other, and this, I can't take credit for this. I was taught this, but nonetheless, I'll let them yell for just a minute. I'm going to let them keep yelling. I'm going to stand there and make sure they ain't going to go to pouncing on each other, but I'm going to let them yell for a minute. And then I'm going to say, hey, guys, what's going on? At about this tone right here. I'm not going to get any louder than that. And they're going to keep on yelling for a minute, but then they're going to see my mouth move and realize they can't hear me. And then they start shutting up so they can hear what I'm saying. That's worked more times than I could ever tell you. And that's exactly what we have to do sometimes with God, is when we hear all this yelling and this noise and this craziness going on in our life that we can't figure out, and we're so scared and we're afraid, and it's okay to be scared and afraid sometimes, but we have to understand that we've got one that is our protector. We got one that's going to be there and take care of us. He's told us so many times in his word the things that he'll do for us, that he'll fight for us, that he will fight for us, that he shall fight for us, and he says, what? Keep your peace. So when you find that peace and everything gets quietened down, that's when you're going to hear him. That's when you're going to hear him. Now, he don't speak to us audibly anymore. I wish he would. I don't know how I'd react. But I wish he would every now and then. I'd just like to hear the voice of God. But nonetheless, you're going to hear it. You're going to be convicted of it. You're going to feel it. You got to remember this. Our faith is based on a personal, intimate relationship with Christ, not on how many events or services we attend. So a personal, intimate relationship usually means that there's quiet time there. You and your wife, or you and your parents, or whoever, you and your kids, or whatever, there's times in your life that you share just quiet moments where you sit and you have that time together to deal with things and to work things out. And see, that's what happens when you have a personal relationship with somebody. That's what you're supposed to have with Jesus Christ. It's not about all these rules that men want to tell you got to follow. It's not about these, religious standards that people place on you or whatever. It's about a relationship with Jesus Christ and slowing down enough to hear what he's saying. That's where we find the resolution to so many of our problems. But our problem is we're too busy running, and we're thinking that if we go to this revival, we're going to hear it. Or if we go to this rally, we're going to hear it. If we go to this worship show, we're going to hear it. You're not going to hear it there. I'm not going to say you won't be moved. I'm just going to say you ain't going to hear it there. But if we get caught up in those things, though, we will inevitably find ourselves looking in the wrong places for help. It just happens. It just happens, guys. King Asa, if we go over into Chronicles, I'm not going to, but King Asa's story is covered in, I think, 1 Chronicles, in like 2 or 3 chapters. But King Asa he took over and things were bad. People were worshiping Baal and all these other false gods. And, he was being attacked. The Ethiopians were going to come and attack him. And so many things going on. And so he relied on God. He turned to God. And he cleaned up this stuff. He got rid of all these idols. And he was praising God. And everything, worked out. And there were many years that there was absolute peace. Well, then all of a sudden, King Baasha rises up against Asa. And he says, I'm going to take over your country. He fights a battle and then he starts shutting down things. He don't want people to be able to get there and get back. Well, Asa freaks out. He does what a lot of us do. He reacted wrong initially, right? And he's like, oh, goodness, how am I going to deal with this? So what he does is he sends silver and gold from God's temple. All right, he sends silver and gold to King Ben-Hadad. And he says, can you help me out with this? This dude's trying to wipe us out. I need your help. Our fathers had bonds together. Let's pick up on that. I need your help. So Ben-Hadad's like, sure, I'll help you out. So he goes in, he fights, and he kills all this other army and does everything. And Asa's like, yeah, cool. We rocked it. Appreciate your help, all that stuff. But then Hananiah, the prophet, comes and he says, hey, Asa, you done messed up now as you done ticked God off because you didn't trust him. You didn't rely on him. You relied on somebody outside, a human being, another carnal body like yourself to get you out of this spot. Do you not remember, he said, when the Ethiopians came against you and all their chariots and all these things and were going to fight you, and you turned to God and God dealt with that situation and delivered you from that. But yet you turn away from him now. You will have war from this day forward. Well, Asa's like, well, okay. I don't like that word, so you're going to prison. So he sends the prophet to prison because he didn't like what he said, right? Well, then a few years later, he developed some disease on his feet. But apparently it's pretty bad. Well, he is so hard-headed on this that he refuses to rely on God and relies strictly on the physician. So God was like, guess what? I am the great physician. You're dead. There you go. That's what happens when we rely on the wrong thing, right? You're thinking, man, that's crazy. Huh? Look, I'm not saying that looking to people to help you in a situation is going to kill you. We're here for each other. We're here to bear one another's burdens, okay? But you have to understand that I'm just here to bear that burden with you. I can't show you the end result. I can't fix it for you. I can walk with you through it, but I can't fix it for you. We can't turn to one another with the expectation that we are the answer for the problems that we're suffering. We can't. God's help is eternal, and that's what we have to understand. It's eternal help. And sometimes all we have to do, though, is just to stop and listen for that still small voice. In Psalms 46:10, what's he say? Be still and know that I am God. That's the nice way of saying, shut up and know who I am. That's the nice way of saying it. Because God did things in a nice way when he was writing or having people write. He wasn't trying to be all forceful and everything. He's got people like me to do that. Shut up and listen. No, I'm just playing. All right. But here's the thing is, God's ways are usually not the same as our ways. As we see in verse 15, this is kind of important. I want you to pay attention here. All right, if I've lost you up to this point, let me reel you back in for just a minute. Verse 15, just this first line. Look, the Lord said to him, go back the way you came. And you're thinking, what? And that's exactly, I can see Elijah now. He's like, what? Did you say go back the way I came? Are you crazy? I mean, that's kind of, and you're thinking, well, you can't talk to God that way. Well, I mean, at that point, I felt that way. I'm like, God, are you sure? Is this exactly what you meant? So just when Elijah thought that he had gotten out of his trouble, God sends him back the way he came. Elijah's thinking, man, I'm 40 days and 40 nights away from all that nonsense. I'm good. No. Listen, sometimes we have to go right through the middle of the storm to find the answers we need. Right through the middle of the storm. We don't get to go around it. God didn't send the Israelites around the Red Sea. He sent them through it. And then he covered his problems afterwards. Isn't that cool? See, he'll send you through things, and then he'll cover it up. After that, it's done. All right, it's done. They were buried under the Red Sea. Speaking of that, did anybody see the news on that? There was an archaeological find in the Red Sea of hundreds of human bones and pieces of armor. And that was in one spot. And they were spreading out their search. And they said that in a however many mile radius that there would likely be up to 5,000 bodies found in that. I'm talking, they found like chariots, they found armor, and all the, you know, God ain't real. Somebody slapped somebody. Yeah. Listen, he didn't give David a long-range sniper rifle and say, David, go up on that hill and pop that giant right between his big old eyes. He didn't say that. David, in order to resolve that problem, in order to give God the glory that he needed, he had to go face to face. David wasn't even called to battle. He was at home tending to the sheep. But God said, come on, boy. Come on. You want to go up here and visit your brothers. And when you do, I'm going to do something great through you. I'm going to resolve their problems through you that I receive the honor and the glory for it. We're seeing now? God receives the honor and the glory. And lastly, this. He didn't allow Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to get away from their punishment. I mean, they were being punished for some nonsense anyway, right? They were being punished because they loved him, and they weren't going to turn away from that, right? So he didn't allow them to run away from their trouble. They had to go right into that fiery furnace. But they didn't go alone. Remember, 3 went in, but when they looked in, there was 4. He went right in that fire with them. God will go right into the most difficult times of your life with you, but you've got to reach out to him and bring him with you. You've got to reach out and say, God, I need you to get me through this. Don't get me out of anything. I need you to get me through this. And he will go in to the worst times of your life with you. And you have to understand, you got to look at the time that was covered while Elijah was running. First of all, we know that it was at least 40 days, right? And you think, well, I've been praying for stuff for 40 years. Keep praying. What's 40 years to God? Okay? To us, it's significant. What's it to him? In his time, he will deal with that situation for you. Bow your head and close your eyes. My hope today is that you are able now to look at those troubles and stop being so hard on yourself for not dealing with